Welcome to Windy Night Stories. Tonight's story is by William Henry Farn, The Souls of the Drowned. A quote from Captain Cook's first voyage. On the evening of the 29th of October, they observed that luminous appearance of the sea, which hath so often been mentioned by navigators, and which has Boone ascribed to such a variety of causes. In a fishing village of Holland, hard by the sea, lived an old fisherman, upon whose family and fortunes there appeared to rest a peculiar blessing. He enjoyed in his advanced age powers still fresh, almost youthful, and his children and children's children, a well-ordered little flock, gathered round him for his pleasure and delight, and there was no lack of valuable property, which frugality and good management continually increased. In the village there were many an idler and bad neighbor, who envied him his happy life, and put rumors in circulation in what way old Andrew had, most likely, come by his stores. It was, then, reported there, he was in league with the evil one, that the latter brought him the golden treasures of the deep, or Andrew had been a pirate in his youth, and was now spending the gains of the poor wretches he had plundered. The whole truth was, however, that Andrew had set free the soul of a poor drowned person from the bottom of the sea, which was a prisoner there, crouching under an inverted vase. The affair was, strictly speaking, as follows. The aged fisher, though he generally made a great secret of it, would, nevertheless, in the intimate circle of his children and grandchildren, let fall stray hints, out of which the others easily made up a perfect story. Andrew himself shall be the speaker. I have not always been so fortunate as that I could see and reckon around me wealth, property, and affectionate hearts, which might sweeten my days to me. It has been given to every one of us to stand once quite alone in the wide world, and to feel himself deserted even to his inmost soul. Heaven suffers us to taste such solitariness, to the end that we may more cheerfully attach ourselves afterwards to a dear human bosom, and learn to love God and his creature, man. My youth had been full of adversity and oppression. Sorely, too, as I labored and toiled, the reward of toil would not come. Already my back began to curve, and my hair to brindle itself with gray, yet I saw no luck before me. It was as though I alone was doomed to remain a single exception to the lot of all. Howbeit I murmured not. I had early learned to love God and to put my trust in him. One evening I went, as I often did, out of my hut, far beyond the boundary of the village, to where the shore stretches to a great distance, and the eye sees nothing but the lonely downs and the broad ocean. This was my favorite spot, because there I heard no other sounds than the roaring of the waves, and encountered no gladsome face of man, which might have told me how miserable and forsaken I was, and I certainly found not a soul to disturb me. The sea, for a great way out, was calm and glassy. I had, in fact, never observed it so still before. No sail and no boat, as far as I could descry. The sky above perfectly cloudless. The sun, which was setting, threw a gleam of yellowish red upon the sand hills before me. I walked on to the place where an old wreck lay. I supported myself against one of its rotten timbers, and contemplated the scene. In the silence here, my grief now came upon me in all its force, and, much as I struggled against it, my thoughts took their old accustomed course. "Andrew," I cried to myself, "today is the day of your patron saint. How little he has done towards making you rich and happy. Last year you buried your wife, and a few weeks afterwards your child also. How have you deserved such misfortune? Had matters turned out differently, you would not have been strolling on here by yourself, but have been sitting with all those merry fellows in the village, who live there without knowing a care, and have the best of their days before them." At these thoughts, melancholy got such fast hold on me that I could fain have wept, but an energy in my bosom kept back my tears. I could do nothing but once more turn my gaze on the sea, whose repose and smiling aspect penetrated my soul. The sun went slowly down, and a colorless gray began to spread itself over the wide plain, after still long, solitary beams of light had trembled here and there, as though they desired to combat the coming spirits of the night. The heavens retained their clear, transparent hue, till they also had gradually filled themselves with deep shades. A gentle breeze sprang up, and cast with an echoing splash small riplets against the body of the wreck. I resumed the perpendicular to set about my return home, when my glance fell upon a phenomenon which I could not, at the moment, understand. For upon the decayed woodwork of the ruinous vessel there appeared a luminous flame that glided to and fro with great quickness, and shone with a bluish glimmering. I can affirm that I, during the many perils of my life, had never been conscious of the feeling that is termed fear. Despite, therefore, of my loneliness, and of the already advanced night, I experienced not the least alarm. I watched with attention the play of the singular flash of fire, and marked, however and anon it disengaged itself from the wreck, darted out a tolerable distance into the sea, sparkled there with a purer light, and then came back again. I had certainly heard tell that treasures sunk in the deep might be indicated sometimes by appearances of this sort. Nevertheless, I felt no desire to dwell upon it further, turned my back, and walked on. At that moment a voice pronounced my name. I faced about instantly, and now saw, behind the wreck, a man standing, as if yet half screened from view, who looked upon me with an aged, pallid countenance. I knew him not, and his vesture was utterly strange to me. He stood for some time without speaking, and his supplicating eye, with which he regarded me in a fixed stare, I shall never forget. At length I cried with a loud and courageous voice, "What is your pleasure, sir? Wherefore have you called me?" "Andrew," spoke the apparition, "thou hast complained but now that fortune hath denied thee wealth, the which I will procure for thee as soon as thou dost the thing that I require of thee." This speech offended me, and I answered quickly, "Pray, sir, what matters my troubles to you? I have wished myself riches. I have not asked you for them." The wan form perceived my chagrin, and moreover that I struck a cross upon my breast. He exclaimed, in accents which rang upon the ear as exceedingly touching and impressive, "I am no evil spirit, Andrew. Give me your confidence. Take this ring, and about the season of the third midnight, dive boldly into the sea to the depth of a gunshot. There wilt thou find 3 vases turned topsy-turvy upon the ground. The middle one lift up, and deliver the soul of a drowned man, which is confined underneath. Then haste quickly up again, without any tarriance below, and without concerning thyself in the least about what thou shalt see and hear. When thou hast accomplished this feat, be assured that I will richly reward thee, and there shall never be an end of the blessing to thee and thine." With these words he vanished without waiting my reply, while he left on the ground before me something resembling a ring, dulled by age. I was cautious not to meddle with it. "Ah," cried I, "what are the souls of the drowned to me, I should like to know? Who could be stupid enough to let themselves be cooped under a wretched old vase at the bottom of the sea? They may stay where they are, for anything I care." In this mood I walked quietly home, and when the appointed third night came, I stirred not from my chamber. The year that now followed reduced me still lower. I lost a small sum of money, which I had saved with much toil. A distemper broke out on board the ship where I served, and I was laid up for 9 months in the hospital. When they discharged me, I came hither on the beggar's crutch to seek the place of my grave, for I was weary of my life. I know not how it came to pass, for I wanted nothing there, that one night I found myself once more on the desolate strand by the sea. It was again St. Andrew's Day, but this time the ocean was not calm. It dashed and roared wildly, and the foaming billows made their sport to the old wreck, so that it seemed as if it intended once more to put to sea. I had not stood long there, when the well-known voice became audible, and the old man stood before me. Now I looked him boldly in the face as an old acquaintance. He repeated the self-same proposal as of yore, only he appeared much more pressing, and left, on vanishing, the very same ring behind him as formerly. This time I took it up and put it on my finger, resolving, moreover, to perform the bidding of the apparition. "There's no help and no succor for you. Andrew, among men, said I to myself. Let us see, then, what ghosts can do. Not to be tedious, I came in the middle of the third night and descended into the water. To this hour, I know not how it was, but the deeper I dived into the ocean, the more it ceased to be ocean, and at last I found myself on a handsome verdant meadow, than which I had never beheld anything more lovely and luxuriant upon earth. A great many young men were assembled on the mead. Some of them were mowing the grass with gleaming scythes, while others tied it together in bundles. They sang, moreover, a merry chant, in which much was said in praise of a beautiful female, as well as of the reward which she would dispense to them when their labor was done. According to the admonition of the Spirit, I lingered not long among them. Still I could not deny myself scrutinizing the face of many a one, and then it seemed to me as if I beheld several of my own friends and acquaintances, who, many, many long years ago, had been drowned at sea. Upon the smooth level stood a house, and as I approached it, a lady of surpassing loveliness came forth to meet me, spread out her arms, and cried, in a sweet, fawning tone, "Ah, then, you have come at last, dearest, to take me home. How long have I been expecting you?" At this speech, coupled with the sight of a form so bewitching, I had well nigh forgotten the warning of the spectre. Howbeit I rallied myself quickly, darted under the raised arms of the fair one, and onwards to a place where I saw the 3 vases standing. In an instant I had thrown down the middle one. I know not what happened to me then. In a moment I saw all the young fellows in the meadow rush towards me. The beautiful female uttered a shriek of lament. I heard it jarring and ringing in my ears to a stunning degree, and had the feeling as though someone was drawing me upwards very fast. When I once more recovered my senses, I found myself on the shore, leaning against the old wreck, bruised apparently in all my limbs. The good of this was that the little wan old man kept conscientiously the promise he had given. I found by my side a leathern wallet, such as merchants used to wear 100 years ago, filled with gold and precious stones. But more still than this treasure was the blessing worth, which, from this time forth, visibly rested on all that I did and undertook. My life was, as it were, transformed. If formerly it had presented the rough side, it now showed only the smooth and velvety one. I took, besides, several journeys, next married my beloved wife here, settled quietly in the village, and accepted the good days which heaven provided me. God be thanked, they have not yet ceased. Though I reckon me near 100, I feel myself still fresh and vigorous, and when young merry fellows collect anywhere, I'm among them, reflecting of a truth, how once there was a time when I was shy of every contented face, which might put me in the mind of my misery and destitution. This is the work of a good spirit. Now in the same village, where the pleasant adventure had befallen our old Andrew, there lived another fisherman, who was the lamest, most dissolute and extravagant fellow that you shall ever find in a day's march. His face resembled a withered plum, which has been boiled and then crushed. His eyes must certainly have once belonged to a water rat. The diminutive nose stuck out upon his uncouth visage like an almond on a piece of gingerbread. A beard, that looked like the bristles of a hedgehog, surrounded his gaping mouth, and his legs were not much thicker than whip handles, and not much straighter than a sickle. The people who came to Peter Knock to transact business with him must, forsooth, learn from his wife Martha he was unwell and could not be seen. The truth was, however, that Peter Knock, from early dawn to the late of evening, lay drunk behind the stove in his hut, and stared at the church tower of Ghent until he mistook it for a flask of brandy. In this state of affairs, then, Dame Martha took the management of the house, and bore the reputation of using a sceptre of so brittle a texture that it wasted away in the handling. She often used to say that her husband was an old, unwieldy packet-boat, which, on account of too strong lading, could not make way properly. She, however, was a light-heeled frigate, for which the wind needed only to touch its slender stern to urge it on its arrow-like career. The truth of this metaphor consisted in this, that Dame Martha looked after the fishing and the business in the daytime, and in the evening, when she came home, soured her husband's life for him. Certain persons would aver that occasionally she thrashed him soundly. These trifling disagreements embittered Peter's private life. No enjoyment, such as really suited his taste, could any more be found. If he sat in Cornelia Delph's tap room, it was not right, in his eyes, for the windows to have a view of the sea, for the sea was hateful to him, because he knew that Dame Martha was rowing and fishing upon it. In fact, he could have wished she might lie deep at the bottom of the same, and he and the fish be at peace from her. Dame Martha, however, was not of that opinion. She had excellent health, and bloomed in her mature years still more, as it seemed, the more visibly Peter Nock declined. If that good woman did not very soon oblige him in this particular, I don't know that our Peter had any ill desire to take her place at the bottom of the ocean, so heartily weary was he of the whole affair. Nevertheless, the pair held out together another year, when it happened that one evening, when the fishing boats ran into the cove, Dame Martha did not find her way home as usual. She had, indeed, a weighty impediment to allege why she could not come, for she lay now, in fact, where Peter had often wished and prayed that she should be, namely, at the bottom of the sea. Peter was alarmed at first at this sudden caprice of fate. Presently, however, he rubbed his hands for joy, slipped into Cornelia Delph's tap room, and made them give him his flask, lighted his small stump of a pipe, stroked his bristly beard upon his lips, shut both eyes with a smirking air, and ever and anon leered at the ocean, for the first time in his life, with the most good-humored expression in the world. For the sea was now his best friend, he thought, in that Dame Martha was living at the bottom of it, and he and the fish had peace from her. That very evening did Peter run down to the lonely shore, and, heaven only knows what came into his head, he seated himself upon the old wreck, flourished his hat in the air, and, with the remains of a pipe between his lips, he hummed in dreamy merriment an old sailor's ditty, which he had once learned in better days. The little black hobgoblin shape, with the shriveled hands roving about in the air, and the reeking tube in the bearded mouth, traced itself, like the image of a shadow, in dark relief against the evening sky and the quiet main. But Peter Nock did not long remain the only performer upon this solitary stage. Presently there appeared a blue flame that moved to and fro, and glided around Peter's legs. The story of Andrew now came into his mind. In the joy of his heart, and in the mood to which the flask in the task-room had transported him, he felt not the least alarm. "Aha, good sire," he cried aloud, "are you there again? What, there's another soul to be set free, is there?" The spirit, who now stood before him, nodded with his head in the affirmative. "Come, then, if anything is to be got by it, here's your man. I have regained my freedom, and am just in the humor to make your pockets lighter by a gold sack or so. Look alive, then, my hearty, and show me, as you have shown Andrew, the way down to your snuggery." The phantom made a wry face at this speech, which evidently was not very agreeable to him. Without replying anything, he placed the ring upon one of the staves of timber in front of Peter and disappeared. Peter considered not long, pushed it hastily on his finger, and no sooner had his foot trod the water than it vanished before him, and he arrived, without further seeking, at the meadow at the bottom of the sea. Here he saw, as Andrew had described, the young men engaged in haymaking and singing a song besides, which celebrated the charms of their mistress and the reward that she was wont to distribute to them. "Aye," said Peter to himself, "and if I too could get to see her, if she really be as pretty as you fellows say, I will behave myself differently from the shamefaced Andrew." Hardly had he uttered these words, when he saw the house on the greensward before him, and a form stepping out of it, thick as a beer barrel, waddling along upon short, splay feet. Her face resembled the rising moon when, level with the horizon, it shines through the mists in a fiery aspect, and a mouth dilated itself thereupon, armed with immense dogfish teeth gleaming and white as the purest ivory. With this mouth and her little flashing eyes, she motioned to the stranger a friendly greeting. Peter was exceedingly alarmed, and had only the courage to ask in a gentle voice for the 3 vases. "What?" shrieked the female. "Are you not come to marry me?" "Not just at present, dearest," stammered Peter, and sidled timidly up to her. At that moment he perceived the 3 inverted vessels. With a couple of springs he was up to them, but now it occurred to him with horror that he had forgotten to ask the spirit which of the vases he ought to raise. The heat drops of suspense came upon his forehead. His limbs quaked. He saw the dumpy woman waddling towards him, filled with rage, and at her call the young men collected from the meadow and advanced, brandishing their sickles and scythes. Without reflecting much, he lifted the middle vase, when there awoke underneath a meddling of the chirping of frogs and the crowing of each, which sounded, for all the world, as though Dame Martha was in her tantrums. Quickly would Peter set the vase up again, but in the hurry and confusion it slipped out of his hands. The din and screeching robbed him of recollection, and when he came once more to himself, he was lying half dead upon the sand of the seashore. An ill-omened adventure, this, of a surety, for honest Peter Nock was, perhaps, not exactly the right sort of person to have dealings with spirits. But the worst of the whole affair remains to be told. Scarcely had he rallied his shattered powers and hobbled into the village, cursing the water sprite and his topsy-turvy vases, when he beheld, at some distance off, a light glimmering in his cottage. "What's that doing there, then, I wonder?" he asked himself, and, stealing closer, applied his ear to the keyhole of the door. "Who can be talking away at that rate inside? Now really," thought Peter, "if I didn't know that Dame Martha was lying as dead as a mouse upon the bench against the wall, these scolding words could come from no other than her throat. However, there's no harm in a man taking a sly peep into his own house, so let's see. With that he opens the door very, very softly, hardly so much as that a ray of light can settle on his nose. But what does he see? The bench against the wall is empty, and in the middle of the room sits Dame Martha, and counts her fish in the tub, as fresh and healthy as if she had never drunk sea-water, and railing besides at that good-for-nothing idler, her husband, who did not let himself be seen yet. When now the door opened and Peter went in, she received him in the usual way, and everything was quite in the old routine. Dame Martha's revival soon got wind in the village, and, as much as Peter tried to hush up the true version of the thing, the wiseacres and prying spirits of the place quickly had it out of him. "It serves him right," cried many. What business had he, out of shameless bravado and greediness of gain, to seek out such a perilous adventure? Others laughed heartily at him, while they named him the pattern of a tender husband, who had not even descended to the bottom of the sea to recover his beloved wife. Peter, however, used to shake his head and contend that his ill luck had consisted in a mistake, for if he had lifted up the vase on the right hand or on the left, he would have inevitably possessed by this time the goodwill of the spirit of the deep, and have ruled over tons of gold. Howbeit, he never had the courage to plan a second trial. The legend, nevertheless, that the souls of those drowned at sea are imprisoned by evil spirits at the bottom thereof, underneath inverted vases, is a truth which no orthodox sailor doubts. The end. And also, just at the very end, for a little bit of fun, a couple of outtakes. Hope you enjoy them. If he sat in Cornelia Delph's tap room, if he sat in Cornelia Delph's tap room, if he sat in Cornelia Delph's tap room, that's a tough one. If he sat in Cornelia Delph's tap room, if he sat in Cornelia Delph's tap room, it was not right, in his eyes, for the windows to have a view of the sea, for the sea was hateful to him, for the sea was hateful to him, because he knew that Dame Martha was rowing and fishing upon it. She had excellent health, and bloomed in her mature years still more, as it seemed. Indeed, if that good woman did not very soon oblige him in this manner, indeed, if that good woman did not very soon oblige him in this, if that good woman did not very soon oblige him, and if that good woman did not very soon oblige him in this particular, I don't know that our Peter had any ill desire to take her place at the bottom of the ocean. The little black hobgoblin shape